I stared at the letter in my hand, reading it for the third time to make sure I was not hallucinating the sheer audacity of what was written on the official Meadowbrook Hills Homeowner Association letterhead. According to Patricia Whitmore, the HOA president and the most insufferable woman I had ever encountered in my 38 years of life, I owed the association $450 for communal snow removal services that I had never requested, never agreed to, and had explicitly voted against at the last HOA meeting. My name is Kellerman, and I had made the mistake of buying a beautiful 4-bedroom colonial in Meadowbrook Hills, Connecticut, 2 years ago. The house itself was perfect. Everything I had dreamed of after years of saving and working my way up from a junior analyst to vice president of acquisitions at Rothstein Capital Partners. What I had not accounted for was Patricia Whitmore and her band of merry enforcers, who seemed to derive genuine pleasure from making the lives of everyone in the neighborhood as miserable as possible. The snow removal fee was particularly galling because I had a snowblower. I had always cleared my own driveway and sidewalk, just like my father had taught me growing up in Vermont. When Patricia had proposed at the October meeting that the HOA hire a company to handle snow removal for all common areas and driveways, I had been one of 7 homeowners who voted against it. We were outvoted 23-7, but here was the kicker. The proposal had been for common areas only. Driveways were supposed to remain each homeowner's responsibility. I grabbed my phone and dialed Patricia's number, which I unfortunately had memorized from the countless times she had called to complain about my grass being a 1/4 inch too tall or my trash bins being visible from the street 5 minutes past the allowable time on collection day. Patricia Whitmore speaking. Her voice had that saccharine quality that made my teeth hurt. "Patricia, it's Kellerman. I just received a bill for snow removal services and I need to discuss this with you." "Oh, Connor," she sighed like I was a particularly slow child. "Yes, all homeowners are required to pay their share of the communal services. The bill is quite clear. The vote was for common areas only. I clear my own driveway." The board reconvened after that meeting and determined that having a unified snow removal service for the entire community would be more aesthetically pleasing and efficient. We contracted with Swift Shovels LLC for the season. I felt my jaw clench. You cannot unilaterally change what was voted on without another community vote. Actually, Connor, if you review your HOA bylaws, Article 7, Section 3, you will see that the board has the authority to make decisions regarding community maintenance and services. We are not required to hold a vote for every little operational detail. This is not a little operational detail, Patricia. This is hundreds of dollars that you are demanding from homeowners without their consent. The invoice is due within 30 days. Failure to pay will result in late fees and potential lien action against your property. Have a wonderful day, Connor. She hung up before I could respond. I stood in my kitchen, staring at my phone, feeling the familiar rage that Patricia seemed to inspire in me. This woman had been a thorn in my side since the day I moved in. She had cited me for having the wrong shade of white on my window shutters. She had demanded I remove a decorative mailbox that was apparently not in keeping with the neighborhood aesthetic. She had even tried to fine me for parking my car on my own driveway instead of in my garage because she felt it looked untidy. I sat down at my kitchen table and opened my laptop. If Patricia wanted to play hardball, I could play too. I pulled up the HOA bylaws and read through Article 7. Section 3. She was technically correct that the board had broad authority over maintenance decisions, but there was language about reasonable expenses and community benefit. I was confident I could challenge this, but it would require legal action, which would be expensive and time-consuming. Then, I had a different idea. I navigated to the Connecticut Secretary of State Business Registry and searched for Swift Shovels LLC. The company had been registered just 3 months ago. The listed principal was one Derek Carmichael with an address in Bridgeport. I did some more digging and found that Swift Shovels had essentially no online presence, no reviews, no website beyond a bare-bones landing page with a phone number. I called the number. It rang 4 times before a man answered. "Yeah, Swift Shovels. Hi, my name is Connor Kellerman. I am a homeowner in Meadowbrook Hills, and I understand you have a contract for snow removal services with our HOA. That's right. You calling about the bill?" In a manner of speaking, I am actually interested in learning more about your business. Are you the owner? Yeah, Derek Carmichael. What do you want to know? How long have you been in the snow removal business, Derek? There was a pause. Few years. Started this company recently, though. What kind of equipment do you operate? Another pause. Got a couple trucks, plows, shovels, the usual. I could tell from his voice that Derek Carmichael was not exactly running a sophisticated operation. Derek, I am going to be direct with you. I work in acquisitions, and I am always looking for investment opportunities. Would you be interested in selling Swift Shovels? He laughed. Selling? I just started the thing. That's exactly why now might be a good time. You get a nice payout, move on to your next venture. I am talking cash, quick, close, no complications. How much cash are we talking? I did some quick mental math. A company with no real assets, no reputation, and a handful of residential contracts was worth essentially nothing. $25,000. Derek whistled. Let me think about it. Give me your number. I gave him my cell and hung up, already planning my next move. I spent the rest of the evening researching snow removal businesses in Connecticut. I learned about licensing requirements, insurance needs, typical contract values, and profit margins. By midnight, I had a pretty good understanding of the industry. Derek called me back the next morning. All right, I thought about your offer. Thing is, I got this contract with the HOA that is going to pay me $12,000 for the season, so 25 does not really make sense for me. Derek, you are getting $12,000 to service how many properties? 30 homes plus the common areas, the main roads and sidewalks. And how much are your operating costs? Fuel, equipment maintenance, labor, silence. You are going to clear 30 driveways and all the common areas every time it snows. We get on average 15 snowfalls per winter in this area, some of them significant storms. You are going to need at least 3 people working full days for each event. At minimum wage, that is going to cost you a fortune, not to mention fuel and equipment repairs. More silence. I am offering you a clean exit from what is going to be a break-even operation at best. 25,000 cash and you walk away. 30,000 and you have a deal. I smiled. 27,000, and I want the business transferred within 3 days. Deal. I spent the next 3 days working with my attorney to handle the paperwork. Derek Carmichael was more than happy to hand over his barely existent company for a quick payday. By Friday, I was the proud owner of Swift Shovels LLC. I immediately set about restructuring the business. I hired a proper bookkeeper, got the insurance policies in order, and reached out to several experienced snow removal contractors in the area to serve as subcontractors when needed. Then I did what I had been planning all along. I sent a formal letter to the Meadowbrook Hills HOA board informing them that Swift Shovels LLC had undergone a change in ownership and management. Furthermore, due to a comprehensive review of operational costs and market rates, The contract price for the season was being adjusted from $12,000 to $24,000, effective immediately. I hand-delivered copies of the letter to Patricia's house on a Sunday afternoon. She answered the door in a tennis outfit, her blonde hair pulled back in a tight ponytail that seemed to stretch her face into a permanent expression of disdain. "Connor, what are you doing here? Delivering important business correspondence." I handed her the envelope with a smile. She tore it open and read the letter, her face going through several interesting color changes. "This is absurd. You cannot just double the price in the middle of a contract." "Actually, Patricia, if you review the contract that you signed, you will see that it includes a standard clause allowing for price adjustments based on changes in operational costs and ownership transitions. It is right there in Section 4, Paragraph B. I am sure you read the contract thoroughly before signing it." Her face told me she had not. "This is extortion," she hissed. "This is business. You wanted a unified snow removal service for the community. Swift Shovels is happy to provide that service at market rates. If you are unhappy with the new pricing, you are welcome to seek bids from other companies. Of course, we are already a month into winter, and most reputable services are fully booked by now. You did this deliberately." I exercised my right as an entrepreneur to acquire a business and operate it profitably. Now, you have two choices. You can accept the new contract terms, or you can terminate the agreement. However, if you terminate, you will still owe the prorated amount for the portion of the season already elapsed, and you will need to find alternative arrangements for snow removal. Given that we have already had 2 snow events, I imagine your homeowners would be quite upset if their driveways suddenly stopped being plowed. Patricia's hands were shaking as she held the letter. "The board will hear about this. I am counting on it. The new invoices will reflect the updated pricing. Have a wonderful day, Patricia." I walked back to my car, feeling better than I had in months. The look on her face had been worth every penny I had spent acquiring Swift Shovels. The emergency HOA board meeting was called for the following Wednesday evening. I received my notice via email, along with every other homeowner in Meadowbrook Hills. The subject line read, "Urgent, discussion of snow removal contract and pricing." I arrived at the community center 10 minutes early. The room was already filling up with homeowners, most of them looking confused and annoyed. I took a seat near the back and waited. Patricia sat at the front table with the other 4 board members. Richard Henderson, a retired dentist who mostly rubber-stamped whatever Patricia wanted. Susan Yates, a nervous woman in her 50s who rarely spoke. Tom Brennan, a middle-aged insurance agent who actually seemed reasonable. And Linda Morrison, a real estate agent who was Patricia's closest ally on the board. Patricia called the meeting to order at 7 sharp. "Thank you all for coming on short notice. We have a serious situation that requires community input. As you all know, at the beginning of the season, the board contracted with Swift Shovels LLC to provide snow removal services for our community. We have recently been informed that the company has been sold, and the new owner has doubled the contract price." There were gasps and mutters from the assembled homeowners. "This puts us in a very difficult position," Patricia continued. "The original contract was $12,000 for the season, which translated to $400 per household. The new owner is demanding $24,000, which would be $800 per household. Who is this new owner?" someone called out. Patricia's lips pressed into a thin line. "The new owner is Connor Kellerman, one of our residents." Every head in the room turned to look at me. I gave a small wave. "That is right," Patricia said, her voice dripping with venom. Connor apparently purchased this company for the sole purpose of extorting his neighbors. I stood up. Point of order, Patricia. I purchased a legitimate business and am operating it at standard market rates. If you had done proper due diligence before signing the contract, you would have realized that $12,000 was significantly below market value for the scope of services being provided. I am simply correcting that error. You manipulated this situation for personal gain. Linda Morrison shouted. I exercised my rights as an entrepreneur. Patricia, you are the one who insisted on forcing every homeowner to pay for a service that many of us did not want. You did not give us a choice. Now you have to pay fair market value for that service. Tom Brennan raised his hand. Can I say something? Patricia nodded curtly. Look, I am not happy about this situation either, but Connor has a point. I actually called around to 3 other snow removal companies this week to get quotes. 2 of them told me they were completely booked for the season. The third one quoted me $28,000 to take over our contract mid-season. $24,000 is actually on the lower end of market rates for a community our size. That is because Connor poisoned the well, Patricia snapped. He knew what he was doing. I knew I was running a business, I said calmly. Patricia, you and the board made this decision without proper research or planning. You forced this service on the community over objections from multiple homeowners. Now you are facing the consequences of poor decision-making. If you want to cancel the contract with Swift Shovels, that is your prerogative. But you will still owe for the services already rendered, and you will need to figure out an alternative solution very quickly. An older man near the front stood up. I am Bill Kowalski, and I have lived in this neighborhood for 20 years. I have to say, I am sick of Patricia and this board ramming things down our throats without listening to what we actually want. I voted against this snow removal contract, just like Connor did. But we got outvoted, and now here we are. Maybe this will teach the board to actually listen to residents instead of treating us like we are children. Several people applauded. Patricia looked furious. We need to take a vote, Tom Brennan said. Our options are: accept the new contract terms at $24,000, which is $800 per household. Cancel the contract and either hire a different company at whatever price we can negotiate mid-season, or revert to individual homeowners handling their own snow removal, which was what some of us wanted in the first place. We cannot revert, Linda Morrison said. We already told everyone they had to pay for the service. Actually, we can, I interjected. The original vote was specifically for common areas. The board expanded the scope unilaterally. If you put it to a new vote and limit it to common areas only, the cost would be much lower. I would be happy to provide a revised quote for just the main roads and sidewalks, no driveways. That would probably run around $6,000 for the season, or $200 per household. Patricia looked like she wanted to throw something at me. You are enjoying this, are you not? I am enjoying watching you realize that you cannot bully people without consequences. Yes. The room erupted in conversation. Homeowners were arguing with each other, with the board, and in some cases with themselves. After 10 minutes of chaos, Tom Brennan stood up and raised his voice. All right, everyone, please settle down. We need to make a decision tonight. I move that we take a binding vote on the following options. Option A. Accept the revised contract with Swift Shovels at $24,000 for full service, including driveways. Option B. Contract with Swift Shovels for common areas only at $6,000, with homeowners responsible for their own driveways. Option C. Terminate the contract with Swift Shovels entirely and seek alternative arrangements. All in favor of Option A, 3 hands went up. Option B. 22 hands, including mine. Option C, 5 hands. Option B carries. Patricia, draft a revised contract with swift shovels for common areas only. Meeting adjourned. Patricia looked like she had been slapped. Linda Morrison was whispering urgently in her ear, but it was too late. The community had spoken, and it was not in Patricia's favor. I approached Tom Brennan as people filed out. "Thank you for handling that professionally." He shook my hand. "Between you and me, Patricia has needed a reality check for a long time. Maybe this will humble her a bit." "I would not count on it," I said. I was right. Over the next 2 weeks, Patricia made my life as difficult as possible. She sent me a citation for having Christmas lights up past the January 15th deadline, even though half the neighborhood still had their lights up. She cited me for having a crack in my driveway that supposedly violated community standards, even though the crack had been there when I bought the house. She even tried to fine me for having a package delivered that sat on my porch for more than 24 hours. I documented everything and responded to each citation with polite, detailed rebuttals pointing out the selective enforcement and harassment. I also began attending every single HOA meeting, taking notes, and asking pointed questions about board decisions and financial transparency. At the February meeting, I requested a full accounting of HOA finances for the past 3 years. Patricia tried to dismiss the request, but Tom Brennan supported me, noting that homeowners had a right to review association finances under Connecticut law. "We will provide the documents," Patricia said tersely. "Within 30 days, as required by state statute," I added. What I received 30 days later was a box of poorly organized receipts, bank statements, and handwritten notes that would have given any accountant a migraine. I spent an entire weekend going through everything, and what I found was deeply troubling. The HOA had been collecting annual dues of $800 per household from 30 families, which should have generated $24,000 per year. Over 3 years, that was $72,000, but the documented expenses totaled only about $48,000 over that same period. There was $24,000 that was not properly accounted for. I dug deeper into the records and found several concerning patterns. There were repeated payments to a company called Meadowbrook Landscaping Services for amounts ranging from $500 to $1,500, often multiple times per month. I looked up Meadowbrook Landscaping Services in the State Business Registry and found that it was owned by Patricia's husband, Gerald Whitmore. There were also regular payments to something called Summit Consulting LLC for community management services. Those payments totaled about $3,000 per year. I looked up Summit Consulting LLC and found that the registered agent was Linda Morrison. I had found embezzlement. Patricia and Linda had been funneling HOA money into their own pockets for years through fake or inflated contracts. I sat in my home office, staring at the evidence spread across my desk. This was serious. This was not just petty HOA drama anymore. This was fraud, potentially criminal fraud. I needed to be careful about how I handled this. I made copies of everything and organized it into a clear, chronological timeline. Then I called Tom Brennan. "Tom, it is Connor Kellerman. I need to talk to you about something serious. Can we meet in person?" We met at a coffee shop in nearby Fairfield the next morning. I brought a folder with copies of the key documents and walked Tom through what I had found. His face grew pale as he looked through the papers. "Oh my God. I had no idea. I mean, I knew Patricia was controlling, but I never thought she would actually steal from the HOA. The question is, what do we do about it? This is potentially criminal." Tom rubbed his face. "We need to bring this to the full board first. If Patricia and Linda have been embezzling, we need to remove them and recover the funds. If they refuse to cooperate, then we go to the police. Are you sure you want to give them a heads up? They might destroy evidence or disappear. We have to follow proper procedure, Connor. If we go to the police without giving the board a chance to address it internally, it could create all kinds of legal complications for the HOA. But I will move quickly. I am calling an emergency board meeting for tomorrow night. Can you present your findings? Absolutely. The emergency board meeting was held in Tom's living room rather than the community center. Only the 5 board members were present, along with me as the presenting homeowner. Patricia and Linda looked annoyed at being summoned on short notice. "What is this about, Tom?" Patricia demanded. "I have plans this evening." "This is about financial irregularities that Connor has discovered in the HOA records. Connor, please present your findings." I opened my folder and began methodically laying out the evidence. I showed the bank statements, the payments to Meadowbrook Landscaping, the payments to Summit Consulting, the missing $24,000. I watched Patricia's face go from annoyed to angry to afraid as I spoke. "This is ridiculous," she said when I finished. "Meadowbrook Landscaping does legitimate work for the community. My husband's company was the lowest bidder." "Really?" "Because I cannot find any record of competitive bids being solicited for landscaping services. I also cannot find any documentation of work being performed that would justify payments of $1,500 multiple times per month. That is $18,000 per year for a community that has maybe 2 acres of common space." "Our landscaping looks beautiful," Linda chimed in. "Everyone says so." "And what about Summit Consulting?" I turned to Linda. "Your company has received $3,000 per year for community management services. What exactly are those services?" "I provide guidance and expertise on HOA operations," Linda said defensively. "You are already on the board. You are supposed to provide that guidance as part of your volunteer service. Paying yourself for the same work is self-dealing." Richard Henderson, who had been silent until now, spoke up in a shaky voice. "Patricia, is this true? Have you been paying your husband's company and Linda's company with HOA funds?" "We have done nothing wrong," Patricia snapped. "Those are legitimate business expenses for legitimate services." "Then you will not mind if we hire an independent forensic accountant to review the books," Tom said quietly. "And you will not mind reimbursing the HOA for any payments that cannot be fully justified with proper documentation." Patricia stood up abruptly. "I do not have to sit here and be accused of crimes by this troublemaker." She pointed at me. "Connor has had it out for me since the day he moved here. This is a witch hunt." "Sit down, Patricia," Tom said firmly. "You are not leaving until we resolve this. Based on what Connor has shown us, there is clear evidence of financial mismanagement at minimum and possible fraud. As board members, we have a fiduciary duty to the homeowners. I am calling for an immediate vote to suspend you and Linda from the board pending an independent investigation." "You cannot do that," Linda said shrilly. "Actually, under the bylaws, we can. Article 12, Section 5 allows for suspension of board members in cases of potential malfeasance." "Richard, Susan, do you support this motion?" Both of them nodded, looking miserable. "Then you are both suspended effective immediately. We will be hiring a forensic accountant and an attorney. If the investigation confirms what Connor has found, we will be demanding full restitution. If you refuse, we will be turning this matter over to the police." Patricia grabbed her purse and stormed out, Linda following close behind. I heard Patricia's car peel out of Tom's driveway with a screech of tires. The remaining board members and I sat in silence for a moment. "Thank you for bringing this to our attention, Connor," Susan Yates said quietly. She looked like she might cry. I never looked at the finances closely. I trusted Patricia. A lot of people did, I said. That is how this kind of thing happens. Over the next 3 weeks, the HOA hired a forensic accountant and an attorney who specialized in nonprofit law. The investigation confirmed everything I had found and uncovered even more questionable transactions. In total, Patricia and Linda had siphoned approximately $32,000 from the HOA over 3 years through their fake contracts and inflated invoices. The attorney sent formal demand letters to both women, requiring them to repay the full amount plus interest within 30 days or face criminal prosecution. Linda caved immediately, writing a check for her portion and resigning from the board. Patricia, however, refused. "I will see you in court," she told Tom over the phone. "You have no proof of any wrongdoing." "We have plenty of proof, Patricia. Do not make this harder than it has to be." But Patricia was nothing if not stubborn. She hired her own attorney and sent a letter threatening to sue the HOA for defamation and wrongful termination from the board. Her attorney argued that all payments to her husband's company were for legitimate services, and that the HOA was engaged in a conspiracy to destroy her reputation. That was when Tom made the decision to file a police report. In Connecticut, theft by embezzlement of more than $10,000 is a Class D felony, punishable by up to 5 years in prison. The Meadowbrook Hills Police Department took the report seriously, especially given the detailed financial documentation we provided. Detective Maria Santos was assigned to the case. She was a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s who had worked fraud cases for years. She interviewed me, Tom, and several other homeowners. She subpoenaed the HOA's bank records and Patricia's personal financial records. She interviewed Gerald Whitmore about his landscaping company. It turned out that Gerald's company had been doing minimal work for the HOA, certainly nothing that justified the payments he had received. When Detective Santos pressed him, he admitted that Patricia had told him to invoice the HOA for $1,800 per month, regardless of actual work performed. He claimed he had not known it was illegal and that he had just been following his wife's instructions. In April, Patricia Whitmore was arrested and charged with 1 count of larceny in the 1st degree and 2 counts of defrauding a public community. Connecticut law treats HOAs similarly to other community organizations, with specific statutes against embezzlement by board members. Patricia was released on $25,000 bail and immediately went on social media to proclaim her innocence, claiming she was the victim of a vindictive neighbor who had manipulated the system. Several people who did not know the full story actually believed her. I started getting nasty messages on Facebook from people accusing me of ruining Patricia's life over petty HOA disputes. I did not respond. I knew the truth would come out. The criminal case moved slowly through the system. Patricia's attorney tried to get the charges dismissed, arguing that the payments were authorized by the board and therefore not theft. The prosecutor countered that Patricia had never disclosed her financial interest in the companies receiving payments, which constituted fraud. Furthermore, the other board members testified that they had not been aware of Patricia's connections to Meadowbrook Landscaping or Linda's ownership of Summit Consulting. In September, nearly 8 months after her arrest, Patricia accepted a plea deal. She pled guilty to 1 count of larceny in the 3rd degree, a lesser charge, in exchange for the other charges being dropped. She was sentenced to 2 years of probation, 300 hours of community service, and ordered to pay full restitution to the HOA, which by that point totaled $34,000 with interest and legal fees. She also had to resign from the HOA board permanently and was barred from serving on any homeowner association board in Connecticut for 10 years. The day the sentence was handed down, I was sitting in the courtroom. Patricia did not look at me once during the entire proceeding. Her husband sat in the back row, looking defeated. When the judge asked if she had anything to say, Patricia stood and gave a brief statement about how she had made mistakes, but had always tried to act in the community's best interests. It rang hollow. After the hearing, I walked out of the courthouse into the bright autumn sunshine. Tom Brennan was waiting for me on the steps. "Well, that is finally over," he said. "Not quite," I replied. "She still has to pay back the money, true, but at least she cannot cause any more damage to the HOA. Speaking of which, we are having elections next month for her seat and Linda's seat. Any interest in joining the board?" I laughed. "Absolutely not. I have had enough of HOA politics to last me a lifetime." "Fair enough. But you know everyone is going to nominate you anyway, right? You are kind of a hero in the neighborhood now." I was not sure about hero, but it was true that my relationship with my neighbors had changed dramatically over the past year. People who had barely acknowledged me before now stopped to chat when they saw me. I got thanked regularly for exposing Patricia's fraud. Several homeowners had even apologized for not supporting me earlier when Patricia was harassing me. The HOA elections took place in October. Despite my protests, I was nominated for a board position. I reluctantly accepted when no one else volunteered, figuring that at least I could help ensure the association was run properly going forward. I was elected along with 3 other new board members. Bill Kowalski, the older gentleman who had spoken up at the contentious snow removal meeting, Jennifer Park, an attorney who had just moved to the neighborhood, and Marcus Thompson, an accountant who was eager to help straighten out the HOA finances. Tom Brennan was elected president, and he immediately set about reforming how the association operated. We implemented transparent financial reporting with monthly statements posted to a new HOA website. We required competitive bids for any service contract over $500. We established clear procedures for citations and enforcement actions to prevent selective targeting of individual homeowners. We even amended the bylaws to require a full homeowner vote for any new fee or assessment over $200 per household. As for Swift Shovels, I continued to operate it for the rest of that winter season and the following year. The company actually turned into a nice side business. In addition to the Meadowbrook Hills contract for common areas, I picked up contracts with 2 other developments in the area. I hired a small crew of reliable workers and invested in proper equipment. By the second season, Swift Shovels was generating a modest but steady profit. The following spring, I sold the company to one of my crew leaders, a hardworking guy named Mike Rodriguez, who had been looking for an opportunity to run his own business. I sold it to him for $40,000, which was about $10,000 more than I had into it, and helped him transition into ownership. He still operates Swift Shovels today, and we still have the contract with Meadowbrook Hills. Patricia Whitmore moved out of the neighborhood about 6 months after her sentencing. She and Gerald sold their house and relocated to somewhere in Florida, I heard. I never saw her again. Linda Morrison stayed in Meadowbrook Hills but kept a very low profile. She eventually moved away too, about a year later. The restitution payments came in slowly over the 2 years of Patricia's probation. She made the minimum payments required by the court, and eventually the full amount was repaid. The HOA used the recovered funds to repave the community roads and update the playground equipment, improvements that actually benefited everyone. Looking back on the whole saga, I sometimes wondered if I had overreacted by buying Swift Shovels just to prove a point to Patricia. But then, I remembered all the petty harassment, all the arbitrary citations, all the times she had abused her power to make my life and others' lives miserable. The snow removal situation had just been the final straw. What I did was not about revenge exactly. It was about refusing to be bullied and showing that people in positions of power cannot act with impunity. Patricia had treated the HOA as her personal fiefdom for too long, and no one had ever challenged her. When I pushed back, her house of cards collapsed, revealing the fraud underneath. The experience taught me some valuable lessons. I learned that HOAs can be force for good when run properly, with transparency and accountability. I learned that standing up to bullies often inspires others to do the same. And I learned that sometimes the best way to fight an unjust system is not to opt out, but to take control and change it from within. 2 years after the whole ordeal began, I was sitting on my back deck on a beautiful Sunday afternoon in May, drinking a beer and watching my neighbor Bill Kowalski mow his lawn. My own lawn was already mowed, trimmed to a perfectly acceptable height that no one would ever cite me for. My driveway was crack-free after I had finally gotten around to fixing it the previous summer. My trash bins were stored neatly in my garage, out of sight. Life in Meadowbrook Hills had become pleasantly boring, which was exactly what I wanted. The new HOA board operated smoothly and efficiently. Fees were reasonable and well documented. Rules were enforced consistently and fairly. People actually seemed to like living here now. My phone buzzed with a text from Tom Brennan. Board meeting Tuesday at 7. Agenda is just routine stuff, should be quick. I texted back a thumbs up and took another sip of my beer. I had never imagined when I bought this house that I would end up on the HOA board, running a snow removal company and helping to send the HOA president to criminal court. Life had a funny way of taking unexpected turns. But I had learned to adapt. When Patricia Whitmore had tried to force me into paying for services I did not want, she had probably thought I would just comply like everyone else always did. She had not counted on me being stubborn enough to buy an entire company just to prove a point. She definitely had not counted on me being thorough enough to uncover her embezzlement scheme. In the end, Patricia's downfall was not really about the snow removal contract. That was just the catalyst. Her real mistake was creating an environment where abuse of power went unchecked for so long that people were ready for change. When someone finally stood up to her, others were eager to join in. I often thought about what would have happened if I had just paid that first $450 bill without complaint. Patricia would still be running the HOA like a tyrant. She and Linda would still be stealing from the community. Homeowners would still be miserable and afraid to speak up. Sometimes making a fuss, even over something that seems small, is exactly the right thing to do. A few weeks later, I got an email from a homeowner in a different development across town. Word had apparently spread about what happened in Meadowbrook Hills. This person was dealing with their own tyrannical HOA president and wanted advice on how to handle it. I wrote back with a detailed response, explaining the importance of documentation, knowing your bylaws, showing up to meetings, and not being afraid to ask hard questions. I also emphasized the importance of building alliances with other homeowners who felt the same way. One person standing alone could be dismissed as a troublemaker, but a group of concerned residents was much harder to ignore. Over the following months, I heard from several other people in similar situations. Apparently, abusive HOAs were more common than I had realized. I started a blog called HOA Accountability, where I shared practical advice for homeowners dealing with overreaching associations. I wrote about financial transparency, proper governance, legal rights, and effective advocacy techniques. The blog gained a modest following. I was never going to get rich from it, but it felt good to help people who were in situations similar to what I had experienced. Some of them successfully reformed their HOAs. Others ended up selling their homes and moving somewhere without an association. A few even followed my example and ran for their own boards to create change from within. I realized that my battle with Patricia Whitmore had given me a unique perspective and skill set. I understood how HOAs were supposed to work, how they could go wrong, and how to fix them. I had lived through the frustration of dealing with an abusive board, and I had come out the other side victorious. The following year, I was approached by an attorney who specialized in HOA law. She had read my blog and was impressed by my knowledge and experience. She asked if I would be interested in serving as an expert consultant for her clients who were in disputes with their HOAs. I would review documents, assess situations, and provide strategic advice. I agreed, and it became yet another unexpected side venture. I helped homeowners in disputes over everything from architectural violations to special assessments to board elections. Some cases settled quickly once the HOA realized the homeowner had competent advice. Others went to mediation or even litigation. I testified as an expert witness twice, explaining HOA governance standards and practices to judges who were unfamiliar with the intricacies of community association law. Through all of this, I kept my day job at Rothstein Capital Partners. My boss found the whole HOA situation amusing and was supportive of my side projects as long as they did not interfere with my work. If anything, the experience had sharpened my negotiation and analytical skills, making me better at my primary job. I eventually stepped down from the Meadowbrook Hills HOA board after serving a 3-year term. I had accomplished what I set out to do. The association was running smoothly, finances were transparent, and there was a culture of accountability. It was time to let others take over and bring fresh perspectives. At my last board meeting, the other members presented me with a plaque thanking me for my service. Tom Brennan made a little speech about how I had saved the community from corruption and helped transform the HOA into something people could be proud of. I was genuinely touched, even though I joked that they should have just bought me a snowblower. Bill Kowalski, who was still on the board, stood up and added his own comments. You know, when Connor first started making trouble about that snow removal bill, I thought he was maybe being a little excessive. Buying the whole company seemed crazy. But he showed us that sometimes you have to fight fire with fire. More importantly, he showed us that we did not have to just accept whatever Patricia decided. We had power too, if we were willing to use it. That is a lesson this community needed to learn. There was applause, and I felt my face flush with embarrassment. I had never been comfortable being the center of attention. I mumbled something about just wanting to be left alone to live in peace, which got a laugh. After the meeting, several neighbors came up to thank me personally and share their own stories about dealing with Patricia over the years. It turned out that almost everyone had their own tale of petty harassment or arbitrary fines. One couple had been cited for having the wrong color mailbox flag. Another had been threatened with legal action over a decorative garden gnome. Someone else had been fined for having a basketball hoop that was supposedly too close to the street, even though it met all the written requirements. Hearing all these stories reinforced my belief that what I had done was right. Patricia had not just been a nuisance. She had been actively making people's lives worse. The fact that her harassment had been covering up actual criminal activity was almost secondary to the daily misery she inflicted on the community. As I drove home that night, I thought about the long, strange journey that had started with a simple bill for snow removal services I did not want. That $450 charge had set off a chain of events that changed my life in ways I never could have predicted. I had become a business owner, an HOA reformer, a blogger, and a consultant, all because I refused to back down from a petty tyrant. The lesson I took away from all of it was simple. Do not let people push you around, even over small things, because small injustices, left unchecked, often hide bigger ones. And sometimes the best way to solve a problem is not to work within the system, but to take control of it. Patricia Whitmore had demanded I pay for communal snow removal, so I bought the company and doubled the rates. That decision, made in a moment of frustration and defiance, ended up exposing fraud, reforming an HOA, launching multiple side businesses, and helping dozens of other homeowners deal with their own problematic associations. Not bad for a guy who just wanted to shovel his own driveway. Years later, I still live in Meadowbrook Hills. The neighborhood is thriving now, with new families moving in regularly. The HOA operates efficiently and fairly. The common areas are well maintained. People actually participate in community events and board meetings because they trust that their voices will be heard. I still run into Tom Brennan occasionally, and we always have a good laugh about the old days when Patricia ruled the neighborhood with an iron fist. He retired from the board after serving as president for 5 years, having successfully rebuilt the association's reputation and finances. My consulting work with HOA disputes continues, though I am selective about which cases I take on. I focus on situations where homeowners are facing genuine abuse of power or where HOAs have strayed far from their intended purpose. I have helped reform several associations and have even consulted with state legislators on proposed HOA reform laws. The blog is still active, though I post less frequently now. It has become a resource that people find when they are searching for help with their own HOA problems. I get emails regularly from grateful homeowners who use the information on the site to resolve their disputes, or who were simply comforted to know they were not alone in their frustrations. Swift Shovels, under Mike Rodriguez's ownership, has grown into a successful small business serving multiple communities throughout Fairfield County. Mike occasionally sends me a thank you card around the holidays, acknowledging that I gave him his start. I am always happy to hear that he is doing well. As for my own home, I take pride in maintaining it properly while also refusing to live in fear of petty citations. My lawn is neat, my house is painted, my driveway is clear. But I also have a small garden gnome in my flower bed, a little tribute to the neighbor who had been cited for 1 year ago. No one has ever complained about it. Sometimes, on snowy mornings, I stand at my window with a cup of coffee and watch the Swift Shovels crew clear the common areas of Meadowbrook Hills. I think about that first letter from Patricia demanding payment, and I smile. That letter had been intended to put me in my place, to remind me that she had power and I did not. Instead, it became the spark that brought down her entire corrupt regime and transformed a troubled HOA into a model of good governance. All because she tried to force me to pay for snow removal I did not want, and I decided to push back. Life has a funny way of working out sometimes. The challenges we face, the injustices we suffer, can become opportunities if we have the courage to stand up and fight back. Not with violence or cruelty, but with intelligence, persistence, and a refusal to accept that things cannot change. Patricia Whitmore taught me that lesson, though I am sure it was not what she intended. She showed me that bullies rely on people being too tired, too scared or too apathetic to challenge them. The moment someone stands up, the bully's power evaporates. I stood up, and in doing so, I discovered strengths and capabilities I did not know I had. I built businesses, reformed systems, helped others, and made my community a better place to live. All of that came from refusing to pay a $450 bill I thought was unfair. So to anyone reading this who is dealing with their own tyrannical HOA, their own petty bureaucrat, their own impossible situation, do not give up. Document everything. Know your rights, build alliances, and if necessary, buy the company and double the rates. Sometimes the most effective way to change a broken system is to take control of it yourself. That is what I did, and I have never regretted it for a moment.